The pregnancy test sat on my kitchen counter like a loaded tool, two pink lines staring back at me with the kind of clarity that destroys lives in an instant. Rachel's hand shook as she pushed it toward me, her engagement ring catching the morning light streaming through our apartment window. "Oh, and I need to tell you something," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the coffee maker's gurgling. "The baby. It's not yours." I stared at the plastic stick, my mind refusing to process what she'd just said. We'd been engaged for 8 months, planning our wedding for next spring. I'd already put the deposit down on the venue, a charming little place overlooking the harbor in Millfield, Massachusetts, where I'd grown up and where we'd planned to start our family. "What do you mean it's not mine?" I asked, though somewhere deep down I already knew. The late nights when she claimed to be grading papers, the way she'd started avoiding my calls, the nervous energy whenever my family came up in conversation. Rachel's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's Seth's," she said. "Your brother's." The words hit me like a physical blow. Seth, my younger brother, the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, the successful finance executive who drove a BMW and lived in a penthouse downtown, the one who'd always gotten everything he wanted, including, apparently, my fiancée. I set my coffee mug down carefully, my hands surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "How long?" 3 months, she whispered. "It started at your birthday party. He was so charming and you were working late again and I was lonely and 3 months." I repeated the words slowly, letting them sink in. 3 months of lies. 3 months of coming home to her, kissing her, making plans for our future while she was carrying my brother's child. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my mother. "Family dinner Sunday at 2. Don't be late. Seth has news to share." I showed Rachel the message, and her face went even paler. "They know? Apparently, we're the last to find out about your little announcement," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Inside out, I felt like I was drowning, but years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who cleaned up everyone else's messes, had taught me to keep my emotions locked down tight. Rachel reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Owen, please, I love you. This was a mistake. We can work through this." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. The woman I'd planned to marry, who I'd thought would be the mother of my children, who I'd trusted with my heart and my future. She was still beautiful, with her auburn hair and green eyes, but I felt nothing. The love I'd carried for her had died the moment she said Seth's name. "No," I said quietly. "We can't." The drive to my parents' house in Millfield took 30 minutes. 30 minutes of Rachel begging me to reconsider, to think about what we were throwing away, to remember how good we used to be together. I listened without responding, my mind already moving past her, past the life we'd planned, toward something I couldn't quite see yet but knew was waiting. My parents' house sat on Elm Street, a colonial with white shutters and a perfectly manicured lawn that my mother tended like a shrine. Seth's BMW was already in the driveway, gleaming in the afternoon sun. I parked my 10-year-old Honda behind it and felt the familiar pang of inadequacy that always hit me when I was around my brother. "Owen," my mother, Patricia Hart, opened the door before we'd even reached the porch. She was a small woman, with graying brown hair and the kind of smile that could make you feel guilty for crimes you hadn't committed. "And Rachel, dear, come in, come in. Seth's been waiting to share his wonderful news." I followed her into the living room, where my father sat in his recliner reading the Sunday paper, and Seth lounged on the sofa with a beer in his hand and a grin on his face that made me want to punch him. "Hey, big brother," Seth said, raising his beer in a mock toast. "Glad you could make it to the show." "What show?" I asked, though I already knew. Seth's grin widened. "The one where I tell Mom and Dad they're going to be grandparents." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her chest, and my father lowered his paper slowly, his eyes moving between Seth and Rachel. "Grandparents?" my mother whispered. "But Owen and Rachel aren't married yet." "It's not Owen's baby," Seth said, his voice casual, like he was discussing the weather. "It's mine." My father's face went red, then purple. "What the heck are you talking about?" "Rachel and I have been seeing each other," Seth explained, reaching over to take her hand. She didn't pull away. "We didn't plan for this to happen, but sometimes life has other ideas. We're going to get married and raise the baby together." "You're what?" My mother's voice was shrill now, her eyes darting between her sons. "Owen, what is he talking about?" I looked at my family, my parents, my brother, my ex-fiancée. and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. He's talking about how he's been sleeping with my fiancée for the past 3 months and got her pregnant. Now wait just a minute, my father said, standing up from his chair. Let's not say things we can't take back. What would you like me to take back, Dad? The part where Seth betrayed me, or the part where Rachel lied to me for 3 months? These things happen, Owen, my mother said, her voice taking on the soothing tone she'd used when we were children, and Seth had broken something of mine. People fall in love. You can't control matters of the heart. I stared at her, waiting for her to realize what she'd just said, waiting for her to remember that I was her son too, that my heart mattered as much as Seth's. But she just stood there, wringing her hands and looking at me like I was the problem. You're taking his side, I said slowly, or you're actually taking his side. There are no sides here, my father said firmly. This is family. We work things out. How exactly do you suggest we work this out? Should I marry Rachel anyway and raise Seth's baby? Would that make everyone happy? Don't be dramatic, my mother snapped. These things happen. You'll find someone else. Seth and Rachel are having a baby. That child needs a stable home. And I don't need a stable home. I don't need a family that has my back. Seth finally spoke up, his voice taking on the reasonable tone that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. Look, Owen, I'm sorry this happened, but Rachel and I, we have something real. We're in love. You can't fight love. Love. I repeated the word like it tasted bad. Is that what you call it? Yes, Rachel said, speaking for the first time since we'd arrived. I love him, Owen. I'm sorry, but I do. I looked around the room one more time, at the faces of the people I thought would always be in my corner, and made a decision that would change everything. Congratulations, I said quietly. I hope you'll all be very happy together. I turned and walked toward the door, ignoring my mother's protests and my father's demands that I sit down and work this out like an adult. Seth called after me, something about not being a sore loser, but I didn't turn around. Outside, I got in my Honda and drove away from my childhood home for what I knew would be the last time. In my rearview mirror, I could see them all standing on the porch, watching me go, probably already planning how to spin this story to make Seth look like the victim. That was fine. Let them have their narrative. I was done being part of their story. The next few weeks passed in a blur of canceled wedding plans and awkward conversations. I moved out of the apartment I'd shared with Rachel and into a small place downtown, a studio above a bookstore that smelled like coffee and old paper. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. My phone rang constantly, my mother wanting to talk things through, my father demanding I stop being stubborn, and Seth leaving voicemails about how he never meant for things to happen this way. I listened to exactly none of them. Instead, I threw myself into my work at the marine engineering firm where I'd been employed for the past 6 years, designing harbor improvements and coastal protection systems. You look like heck, said my colleague and closest friend Bill Morrison, sliding into the chair across from my desk. Bill was a gruff man in his 50s who'd been divorced twice and had strong opinions about family loyalty. Thanks for the pep talk, I said, not looking up from the blueprints spread across my desk. When's the last time you ate something that wasn't vending machine coffee? I couldn't remember, which probably answered his question. Come on, Bill said, standing up and grabbing his jacket. I'm buying you lunch, and you're going to tell me what's really going on. And don't say nothing, because I've seen corpses with more life in them than you've got right now. We went to Murphy's Pub, a dive bar near the harbor that served the kind of food that could absorb a week's worth of alcohol. Bill ordered us both fish and chips and a couple of beers, then leaned back in his chair and waited. My brother got my fiancée pregnant, I said finally. My parents think I should get over it for the sake of family harmony. Bill nearly choked on his beer. Jesus Christ, Owen. Are you serious? Dead serious? They're getting married next month. Small ceremony, I'm not invited. And your parents are okay with this? More than okay. They're throwing them an engagement party next weekend. Bill shook his head slowly. That's the most messed up thing I've ever heard, and I've heard some doozies. The best part? My mother called yesterday to ask if I wanted to contribute to their wedding gift. Apparently, they're registering at Williams-Sonoma. What did you tell her? I hung up. Bill nodded approvingly. Good man. What's your plan? I don't have one. I'm just trying to get through each day without losing my mind. That's not a plan. That's survival. You need to think bigger. Before I could ask what he meant, my phone buzzed with a text message. Then another, then another. I pulled it out and saw a string of messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Sorry to hear about Rachel, man. That sucks. Saw the engagement announcement in the paper. Brutal. Always thought your brother was a snake. Now everyone knows it. I looked up at Bill, confused. What engagement announcement? Bill's face went grim. He pulled out his phone and scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward me. It was the local newspaper's website, and there, in the lifestyle section, was a photo of Seth and Rachel looking blissfully happy under the headline, Local Finance Executive Announces Engagement. I read the article with growing disbelief. According to the paper, Seth Hart, successful investment advisor, was engaged to marry Rachel Coleman, beloved elementary school teacher. The happy couple was expecting their first child in the spring and planning a winter wedding. There was no mention of me, no acknowledgement that Rachel had been engaged to someone else just a month ago. They completely erased me, I said, staring at the screen like I never existed. That's some next-level gaslighting right there, Bill said. Your family's got balls, I'll give them that. My phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered, Owen, honey, I'm so glad you picked up. Did you see the announcement? Isn't it wonderful? The photographer really captured. You put an engagement announcement in the paper, I said, cutting her off. Well, yes, dear. People need to know about the wedding. You understand? Do I? Explain it to me, Mom. Explain how it's normal to announce your son's engagement to his brother's ex-fiancée without mentioning that small detail. There's no need to air our dirty laundry in public, Owen. What's done is done. Seth and Rachel are having a baby, and that's what matters now. What about what matters to me? You'll find someone else, sweetheart. You're a catch. Any girl would be lucky to have you. The casual dismissal of my pain, the way she talked about my relationship like it was a minor inconvenience, made something snap inside me. You're right, Mom. What's done is done. And what I'm done with is this family. Oh, and don't be ridiculous. I hung up and turned off my phone. Feel better? Bill asked. Actually, yeah, I do. Over the next few days, I started to notice how much my family had depended on me without my realizing it. My father called the office looking for help with his taxes, something I'd done for him every year since I graduated college. My mother left voicemails asking about the family computer, which I'd set up and maintained for the past decade. Even Seth reached out, wondering if I could recommend him to a client who was looking for marine engineering services. I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on work, taking on extra projects and staying late at the office. I started going to the gym again, something I'd neglected during my relationship with Rachel. I read books, watched movies I'd been meaning to see, and slowly started to remember who I was before I'd become half of a couple. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later, when my mother showed up at my apartment, unannounced. Owen, we need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the studio. She looked around at my sparse furnishings and minimal decorations with obvious disapproval. This place is depressing. What do you want, Mom? I want my son back. This silent treatment has gone on long enough. Seth and Rachel are getting married in 2 weeks, and you're going to be there. No, I'm not. Yes, you are, because that's what family does. We show up for each other, even when things are difficult. I stared at her, this woman who had raised me, who had kissed my scraped knees and cheered at my baseball games, and realized that I didn't recognize her anymore. Where was the family when I needed them? I asked quietly. Where was the showing up when my world fell apart? You're being dramatic. Couples break up all the time. Couples don't usually break up because one person's brother gets the other person pregnant. These things happen, Owen. You need to accept that and move on. I have moved on. I've moved on from all of you. My mother's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the woman who used to read me bedtime stories and make my favorite cookies when I was sick. Please, she whispered, don't do this. Don't break up the family over this. I'm not breaking up anything, Mom. I'm just refusing to pretend that what happened is okay. She left without another word, and I didn't see or hear from any of them for the next month. The wedding happened on a cold Saturday in November. I knew because the photos showed up all over social media. Seth in his tuxedo, Rachel in white, which seemed like a choice, my parents beaming with pride. They looked happy, all of them, like they'd successfully excised a cancer from their perfect family. I spent that Saturday at the office, working on a project that didn't need to be finished until the following week. It felt good to have somewhere to be, something productive to focus on while my brother married my ex-fiancée. Bill found me there around 6 o'clock, carrying a bottle of whiskey and wearing a grim expression. Figured you might need some company tonight, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I'm fine, I said, though we both knew that was a lie. Sure you are. That's why you're here on a Saturday night instead of home watching the game like a normal person. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and pushed one toward me. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. To new beginnings, I agreed, and we drank. You know what the crazy part is? I said after my second glass. I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just empty, like they hollowed me out and threw away the pieces. Anger would be healthier, Bill said. Anger means you still care. Maybe I don't want to care anymore. That's the whiskey talking. No, I think that's me talking. For the first time in my life, I'm saying what I actually think instead of what everyone wants to hear. Bill nodded slowly. So what are you thinking? I looked out the window at the harbor where boats bobbed gently in their slips and tried to put my feelings into words. I'm thinking that I spent 38 years being the good son, the reliable one, the one who never caused problems or asked for too much. And when I finally needed them to choose me, just once, they couldn't do it. So what now? Now I stop waiting for them to choose me. I choose myself. The real test came 2 months later, when Seth called me at work. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Owen, thank God, I need your help. Hello to you too, Seth. Look, I know things have been weird between us, but I'm in trouble. Real trouble. I leaned back in my chair and waited for him to continue. The investment firm is letting me go. There was some irregularity in one of my accounts, and they're blaming me. It's not my fault, but they need a scapegoat, and apparently I'm it. I'm sorry to hear that. The thing is, Rachel's due next month, and we just bought the house, and the mortgage payments are ending us. I was wondering if you could maybe lend us some money, just until I get back on my feet. I almost laughed. After everything that had happened, after they'd cut me out of their lives and erased me from their story, Seth was calling to ask for money. How much? I asked. Maybe 20,000? I know it's a lot, but you've always been good with money, and I'm desperate here. $20,000. I had it. I'd been saving for the wedding that never happened and the honeymoon that never was. The money was just sitting in my account, earning minimal interest. I can't help you, I said. Come on, Owen. I'm your brother. Are you? Because brothers don't usually steal each other's fiancés. That's not fair. Rachel and I fell in love. It's not like I planned for this to happen. No, you just let it happen. And now you want me to bail you out of the consequences. Please, I'm begging you here. The same way I begged you not to destroy my life? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I never begged, Seth said finally, his voice turning cold. I told you what was happening and expected you to deal with it like an adult. Well, this is me dealing with it like an adult. Good luck with the job hunt. I hung up and felt something shift inside me, like a door closing on a room I'd never need to enter again. The calls started coming more frequently after that, my mother asking if I'd heard about Seth's employment situation and whether I might be able to help. My father, gruff and uncomfortable, suggesting that maybe it was time to let bygones be bygones and step up for family. Even Rachel called once, crying about how scared she was about the baby coming and how they couldn't afford the medical bills. I listened to their voicemails and deleted them without responding. Then, 3 weeks before Rachel's due date, my mother showed up at my apartment again. This time, she looked smaller somehow, older, like the stress of the past few months had aged her. Owen, please, I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for your nephew or niece. That baby didn't ask to be born into this mess. You're right, I said. The baby didn't ask for any of this. But that's not my problem to solve. How can you be so cold? I learned from the best. She flinched like I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you took Seth's side without even asking for my version of events? Was it fair when you asked me to contribute to their wedding gift? Was it fair when you put their engagement announcement in the paper like I never existed? We were trying to make the best of a bad situation. No, you were trying to make things easy for Seth, the way you always have, the way you always will. He's my son, too. So am I, or I was, until you decided I was expendable. My mother started crying then, the kind of quiet, desperate tears that might have broken my heart 6 months earlier. But I felt nothing except a distant sort of pity. Please, she whispered, don't let our family fall apart over this. I'm not letting anything fall apart, Mom. I'm just not holding it together anymore. After she left, I poured myself a drink and sat by the window watching the sun set over the harbor. For the first time in months, I felt something approaching peace. The baby was born on a Tuesday in March. I knew because my mother left a voicemail with all the details, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy and perfect, named Michael after my grandfather. She sounded exhausted and strained, nothing like the joyful grandmother I'd expected her to be. I deleted the message and went to work. But the calls didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. Seth had been out of work for 4 months and still hadn't found anything. Rachel was struggling with postpartum depression and couldn't go back to teaching yet. The mortgage was 3 months behind, and the bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. They're going to lose the house, my father said when he cornered me at the grocery store one Saturday morning. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing clothes that needed washing. Nothing like the proud, put-together man I remembered. That's unfortunate, I said, continuing to shop for groceries. Unfortunate? Owen, they're going to be homeless, with a baby. They should have thought about that before they decided to blow up their lives. This isn't like you. You've always been the one who helps people. I stopped walking and turned to face him. The person who helped people? He died the day you chose Seth over me. This is who I am now. You can't mean that. I absolutely mean it. You made your choice, Dad. You chose Seth and Rachel and their baby over me. Now live with the consequences. We never chose anyone over you. Really? When Seth told you he'd been sleeping with my fiancée and got her pregnant, what was your response? Did you tell him he was a selfish bastard who'd betrayed his brother? Did you demand that he make things right? Or did you tell me to get over it and move on? My father's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said, and walked away. The breaking point came a month later. I was working late when my phone rang. It was my mother, and she sounded frantic. Owen, thank God, I need you to come to the hospital. It's your father. What happened? Heart attack. He's in surgery now. Please, I need you here. I sat in my office chair staring out at the dark harbor and felt absolutely nothing. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. I hope he'll be okay. You're sorry, Owen? This is your father we're talking about. Is it? Because fathers are supposed to protect their children, not throw them away when it's convenient. He's asking for you. He wants to see you. That's nice. I wanted my family to have my back when my world fell apart. We don't always get what we want. Owen, please. I hung up and turned off my phone. My father survived the surgery and spent a week in the hospital. I knew because Bill saw the story in the local paper and showed it to me. The article mentioned that Harold Hart was recovering well and was surrounded by loving family. There was a photo of Seth and Rachel with the baby, visiting his bedside. I wasn't in the picture. Just like the engagement announcement, I'd been erased from the narrative. You okay? Bill asked, watching my face as I read the article. I'm fine, I said, and meant it. You sure? Because most people would have some kind of reaction to their father having a heart attack. Most people have fathers who act like fathers. Mine chose his golden child over me, so now he gets to live with that choice. Bill studied me for a long moment. You know, when this whole thing started, I thought you were handling it too well. Too calm, too controlled. I was waiting for you to explode. Sorry to disappoint you. I'm not disappointed, I'm impressed. Most people would have caved by now, would have gone crawling back to their family, begging for forgiveness for crimes they didn't commit. But you're holding the line. It doesn't feel like holding a line. It feels like letting go. Sometimes those are the same thing. That evening I got home to find Seth sitting on the steps outside my building. He looked awful, thin, unshaven, wearing a wrinkled shirt and jeans that had seen better days. The golden child had definitely lost his shine. We need to talk, he said, standing up as I approached. No, we don't. Yes, we do. Dad almost died, Owen. Mom's falling apart. Rachel's barely functioning. The baby cries all the time. Everything's a mess, and you're the only one who can fix it. I unlocked my door and started to go inside. Seth grabbed my arm. Don't walk away from me. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Shh, remove your hand. Or what? Or I'll remove it for you. There was something in my voice that made him let go immediately. This isn't you, he said, following me up the stairs to my apartment. The Owen I know would never turn his back on family. The Owen you knew as a doormat who let people walk all over him because he thought that's what family meant. That Owen is gone. Because of Rachel? Come on, man. There are other women out there. I turned to face him, and he actually took a step back. You think this is about Rachel, isn't it? This is about you looking me in the eye and telling me you'd been sleeping with my fiancée for 3 months. This is about Mom and Dad taking your side without question. This is about all of you deciding that my feelings, my pain, my life didn't matter as much as your convenience. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. And now that the consequences are catching up with you, you want me to fix it? Well, guess what? I'm not your cleanup crew anymore. Seth's face went red. You selfish bastard. Dad's in the hospital and you won't even visit him. What kind of son does that? The kind whose father chose his other son over him when it mattered. He never chose me over you. Really, when you told him you'd betrayed me in the worst possible way. What did he say? Did he tell you to get out of his house? Did he tell you that you were no longer his son? Or did he tell me to get over it and move on? Seth's silence spoke volumes. That's what I thought, I said, opening my apartment door. Now get out of my building before I call the police. You wouldn't. Try me. He left, but not before telling me exactly what he thought of me, using language that would have made our mother wash his mouth out with soap when we were kids. I made myself dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat by the window watching the boats in the harbor. For the first time in almost a year, I felt completely at peace. The end came not with a bang, but with a whimper. It was a Thursday morning in June when Bill walked into my office with a newspaper tucked under his arm and a grim expression on his face. You're going to want to see this, he said, spreading the paper on my desk. The headline read, Local Family Loses Home to Foreclosure. Below it was a photo of Seth and Rachel standing in front of the house they'd bought with such optimism less than a year ago. Rachel was holding baby Michael, and both she and Seth looked haggard and defeated. I read the article with detached interest. It was a human interest piece about the struggles of young families in the current economy. Seth was quoted extensively about the challenges of finding work in his field and the stress of trying to provide for a new baby. Rachel talked about the difficulty of returning to work while dealing with postpartum depression. The reporter had done their research. The article mentioned that Seth had been let go from his position at a prominent investment firm due to irregularities in client accounts and had been unable to find comparable work since. It detailed their mounting debts, the failed attempts to modify their mortgage, and their ultimate eviction from the home they'd purchased just months before their wedding. What struck me most was what wasn't in the article. There was no mention of family support, no quotes from grandparents rallying around the young couple, no indication that they had anyone to turn to in their time of need. Looks like your parents aren't in a position to help them, Bill observed, reading over my shoulder. Looks like it. You know why, right? I looked up at him. Enlighten me. Your dad's medical bills. Heart surgery isn't cheap, even with insurance. Plus, he's been out of work since the attack. Your mom's part-time job at the library doesn't cover much. I hadn't thought about that, but it made sense. My father had worked construction his entire life, a physically demanding job that he couldn't return to after major heart surgery. My mother's 20-hour-a-week position at the local library had always been more about staying busy than earning money. So they're all broke, I said. Looks like it, and according to this article, Seth and Rachel are moving in with her parents in Ohio. Ohio. 1,500 miles away from the life they'd built here, from the family that had supported their relationship, from everything they'd thought they wanted. Must be hard, I said, and meant it. Not hard enough to make me want to help, but hard nonetheless. My phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I'd been taking her calls lately, though I never offered the help she was obviously hoping for. Owen, did you see the newspaper? I did. They're leaving tomorrow. Seth and Rachel and the baby. They're moving to Ohio. So I heard. This is your last chance to make things right. Make what right, Mom? You know what? This family is falling apart, and you're the only one who can save it. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the harbor, where a fishing boat was heading out to sea under a brilliant blue sky. The family fell apart the day you chose Seth over me, I said quietly. I didn't break it. I just stopped trying to hold the pieces together. Please, Owen, I'm begging you, help them. Why should I? Because they're family. So was I. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You still are, she whispered. No, Mom, I'm not. You made that clear when you asked me to get over my brother stealing my fiancée. You made it clear when you threw them an engagement party. You made it clear when you put their announcement in the paper like I never existed. We made mistakes. You made choices. And now you get to live with them. What about Michael? He's your nephew. He's innocent in all this. You're right. He is innocent. And he deserves better than parents who built their relationship on betrayal and lies. Maybe this move will be good for them. Maybe they'll learn to stand on their own feet instead of expecting everyone else to clean up their messes. You've become so cold. I've become honest. There's a difference. I hung up and turned back to my work. Bill was still standing there, watching me with an unreadable expression. Feel good? He asked. Feels like closure. That's not what I asked. I considered the question seriously. Did it feel good to watch my family implode? Did it feel good to know that Seth was struggling, that my parents were facing financial hardship, that Rachel was overwhelmed and depressed? No, I said finally, it doesn't feel good, but it feels right. There's a difference? Yeah, sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel good. Sometimes it feels necessary. That evening I drove to the house where Seth and Rachel had lived. There was a moving truck in the driveway and boxes stacked on the porch. I parked across the street and watched as they loaded their belongings, preparing for their exodus to Ohio. Seth looked older than his 34 years, his face drawn with stress and exhaustion. Rachel moved slowly, carefully, like someone who was still recovering from a long illness. The baby fussed in his carrier, and neither parent seemed to have the energy to comfort him properly. My mother was there too, helping to carry boxes and trying to keep a brave face. But I could see the tears she was trying to hide, the way her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. My father sat in a lawn chair, still weak from his surgery, watching his golden child's life fall apart. I could have gotten out of the car. I could have walked across the street and offered to help. I could have written them a check that would have solved their immediate problems and allowed them to stay in town, near family, near the support system they'd taken for granted. Instead, I started my engine and drove away. The next morning, I got a text message from an unknown number. It was from Rachel. We're leaving today. I know you probably don't care, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. You deserve better from all of us. I stared at the message for a long time and then typed back, You're right, I did. Then I deleted her number and blocked it. A week later, my mother called to tell me they'd made it safely to Ohio. Seth had found a temporary job at Rachel's father's auto repair shop. They were living in her childhood bedroom with the baby, but they were managing. He wants to call you, she said, to apologize, to try to make things right. Tell him not to bother. Oh, and tell him that some things can't be fixed, Mom. Tell him that some choices have permanent consequences. Tell him that I hope he's happy with the life he chose because it's the only one he's going to get. 3 months later, I got a promotion at work. Senior marine engineer with a significant raise in my own office overlooking the harbor. I celebrated by buying a boat. Nothing fancy, just a small sailboat that I could take out on weekends. I was on that boat, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, when my phone rang. It was my mother again. Your father wants to see you, she said without preamble. He's not doing well. The doctors say it might not be long. I'm sorry to hear that. Will you come? Please. He needs to make peace with you before what? Before he dies? That's convenient timing. Don't be cruel. I'm not being cruel, I'm being honest. Dad had a year to make peace with me. He chose not to. Now that he's facing mortality, suddenly it's urgent. He made mistakes. He made choices, and I'm making mine. I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I sailed until the stars came out, feeling the wind in my hair and the salt spray on my face, finally understanding what freedom felt like. My father died 2 weeks later. I learned about it from the obituary in the newspaper, which described him as a loving husband and father, survived by his wife Patricia, his son Seth, daughter-in-law Rachel, and grandson Michael. I wasn't mentioned. Even in death, they'd erased me from the family story. I didn't attend the funeral. Instead, I took the day off work and sailed out to the middle of the harbor, where I scattered the ashes of the man I used to be. The people pleaser, the doormat, the one who'd always put family first, even when family put him last. That evening, I came home to find my mother sitting on the steps outside my building. She looked ancient, broken, like she'd aged a decade in the past 2 weeks. He asked for you at the end, she said without looking up. He kept saying your name. That's nice? That's all you have to say? What would you like me to say, Mom? That I'm sorry I missed his deathbed reconciliation speech? That I regret not giving him the chance to ease his conscience before he died? I'd like you to say that you're sorry he's gone. I'd like you to say that you loved him despite everything. I sat down beside her on the steps, close enough to touch but not touching. I did love him, I said quietly. I loved all of you. That's what made it so devastating when you chose Seth over me. We never chose. Yes, you did. And now you get to live with that choice. Seth's in Ohio, working at an auto repair shop, living in his wife's childhood bedroom, with a baby he can barely afford to feed. Dad's dead, and you're alone, sitting on the steps of your estranged son's apartment building, begging for forgiveness that isn't coming. She started crying then, the kind of deep, soul-wrenching sobs that come from finally understanding the true cost of your choices. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't give me back the year I spent rebuilding my life from nothing. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that when I needed you most, you weren't there. What can I do? Tell me what I can do to fix this." I looked at this woman who had given birth to me, who had raised me, who had loved me in her own flawed way and felt nothing but a distant sadness for what we'd lost. "Nothing," I said gently. "There's nothing you can do. The time for fixing things was a year ago. Now it's too late. It's never too late for family. Yes, it is. Sometimes it absolutely is." I stood up and walked toward my building. At the door, I turned back to look at her one last time. "Take care of yourself, Mom. Find a way to be happy with the family you chose." I went inside and closed the door behind me, leaving her sitting alone in the gathering darkness. 6 months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that my mother had sold the family home and moved to Ohio to be closer to Seth and the baby. The house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned to ride a bike and had birthday parties and brought home report cards, was now owned by strangers. I felt nothing when I heard the news. No sadness, no nostalgia, no regret. The past was the past, and I was finally completely free of it. A year after that, I met someone. Her name was Sarah, and she was a marine biologist who worked at the local aquarium. She was smart and funny and kind, and when I told her about my family, the whole story without sugarcoating or excuses, she didn't try to convince me to reconcile with them. "Some bridges are meant to be burned," she said simply. "Sometimes walking away is the healthiest thing you can do." We were married 2 years later in a small ceremony on the beach with just a few close friends. Bill walked me down the aisle, and Sarah's father performed the ceremony. It was perfect in its simplicity, unmarred by family drama or obligation. As I write this, Sarah is pregnant with our first child. We've already decided that our children will never know their paternal grandparents or uncle. They'll grow up understanding that family is about love and loyalty and choosing each other every day, not about biological ties or obligation. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret cutting off my family, if I ever wonder what might have happened if I'd forgiven them, if I'd been the bigger person, if I'd put the past behind me and moved on. The answer is no, never. Not once, because I learned something important in those dark months after Seth's betrayal. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to stop trying to fix what's broken and start building something new. My brother chose his own happiness over mine. My parents chose their golden child over their other son. And I chose myself. For the first time in my life, I chose myself, and I've never looked back.